Just like I'm sure some aspiring business people, some established business people already in here, I started out my kitchen and ran up a bit of debt on a credit card, and it's a pretty good business right now, and continues to grow and be successful as well in a very competitive market space. We don't do anything particularly unique. We're not Apple. We actually just resell and integrate other people's solutions, so it's massively competitive. We've got hundreds and hundreds of competitors directly in our space that we come across every day. So people say, who are your main competitors? And I say, where do I start? So marketing is absolutely critical to the function of that business to make it successful and keep it successful. And then Gandhi's flip-flops. So I've come into that. It's a very it's our first kind of first year of trading this year. Very exciting business. Started by next slide, a couple of guys who sadly were orphaned in the Boxing Day tsunami in 2004, and basically sort of have rebuilt their lives and decided that they wanted to achieve something great in their life, and actually to build an orphanage in India in honour of their parents. So I'm an investor and also I'm an active director as well, trying to help these young lads. And around the social enterprise, obviously we can generate a lot more marketing around that as well. So for our first 230,000 pairs sold, we'll generate our first orphanage in India, basically, and we're going to involve people in that journey and very much bring people into that journey and make it very transparent process. So as Cosmopolitan said, we love Gandhi's, since when can fashion make you feel so good? So it's a good quote, somebody stuck it up there. Why do people make decisions in their personal life and business? And is it greed? Is it desire? Is it one-upmanship? Is it just that you want to belong to that social group? There are many things that make us make personal decisions and purchasing decisions. The idea really is, there's different views on it. I think it's about 10%. Execution of the idea, what you actually do with that idea. You can take a very poor idea and execute it really well, and you can have a great idea and execute it very poorly. Really understand where the target market is, how likely they are to buy that product, and you've really got to be creative about where you're doing if you are in the sort of advertising space, be that billboards, Google AdWords, handing out flyers on the beach. You've really got to be very creative in how you overcome the challenge of the cost of marketing. Start small and kind of build out. Don't go out with a grand plan. Start small, lots of different ideas, lots of different routes to market, lots of different marketing plans, ways of approaching your target audience, your target customer base. Find out what works and then start doing more of that and start doing it better. Whilst an eBay competitor, I could give you loads of good reasons why I can build you a better eBay website. The cost of me marketing that is just it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal because of the installed loyal customer base with all their profiles and their star ratings and all that kind of stuff they have. We've been really good at Gandhi's of getting lots of free PR and just doing kind of weirdly wacky stunts and things like that. Like when there was bad weather, last year, it rained all last summer. And so we had a lot of people go down to the Houses of Parliament and do a protest about how David Cameron should give us better weather in England. It's a silly stunt, right? But what we did at the same time, we called all the press, and actually 3 main newspapers turned up and took loads of pictures of us with the Gandhis and the flip-flops and actually ran stories on it. So actually we got probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of equivalent advertising space for zero cost. Personally for me, beware of Google AdWords. Unless you know what you're doing, absolutely get an expert in, because you can burn money like there's no tomorrow. And again, any business that me starts with, I'm going to put a lot of money into Google AdWords. It's like, oh, okay, right. Beware buyer on that. It's a phenomenal platform, but you absolutely have to know what you're doing on that. Collaboration on your marketing can be a really cost-effective way. If you can identify a brand that you'd like to work with, or a company that's got an existing customer base that you think that that you could really sell your product or service to that existing customer base. You do the deal with that customer, with that existing company who's got that customer base, and that can be a huge sales and marketing accelerator from your perspective. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. A lot to do with good marketing is also just getting on the phone to people and asking, can you do this? Can you do that? I'm trying to launch this product. I'm trying to do this service. Can you help me? Can I do this? Can I buy this cheaply? Is there any deals going? It's all about sort of finding the right channels for you, getting a good price, and going to market in the most cost-effective way you can.
When you've mass marketed to a corporate market, have you found that marketing a proposition that is a benefit to the organisation has a better impact than marketing a proposition to the individuals within the organisation?
I guess there's a couple of levels in that. So broadly, obviously, Of course, being an IT company, we need to sell something to that company that does a good job for them and makes them more efficient and increases their customer satisfaction or whatever it is we're trying to achieve with a specific IT solution. So if we don't do a great job for that company, then we can't go on and PR that, we can't reference them, and we can't do case studies about it and all that kind of stuff, and ultimately they'll be a bit dissatisfied. So our primary concern is to market to that company. But then there's a second level of marketing that we need to do with the individual buyer and understand, is it political reason, is it for his ego, is it because he's got budget he's got to spend and he just has to get rid of it to prove to his boss he can manage budgets. So there's a second level of marketing that we need to be doing. And often in that as well, and it's a complex environment, we've got multi-level marketing going on as well. So we'll have a number of key decision makers. It could be as many as 10 upwards, and we've got to sell to all of those individuals. So marketing might be involved if it's a CRM platform, the IT guy will be involved, the MD might be involved as well. There could be lots of different key stakeholders across the organisation, and we've got to understand from a marketing perspective what are their buying criteria.
My background was in politics, doing political communication, working, having left university in '92 for a bloke called Tony Blair, who then went on to great things, fortunately, because I was working for him, and ended up in Downing Street, and doing the campaign communication for '97, and then the period of the new government, back when they was all very popular. What we do now is do communication for businesses, for large foundations, for governments as well. Those are some of the people we work for. And we try and help them with messaging, and I think help them with their communication and bring in the techniques of political communication to business communication. Because I think although the 4 Ps and 4 Cs provide a decent framework for some approach to marketing, I actually think that the political techniques of working out messaging and building a strategy out of messaging can be just as effective for companies, whether they're marketing a product or whether they're marketing themselves as a corporate entity. I think the key insight that the politics brings is that it's not communication is not about focusing on the press release. It's not about the tactical execution of communication tactic. It is about working out the distilled essence of what you stand for, what you're trying to say, and only once you've got that right can you then go on, define the audiences that you want to communicate to, and then put in place a strategy to get the messages to the audiences. So the principles of effective messaging, whether it be in the political sphere or the business sphere, those are some of the things that aren't exactly rocket science, but it has to be very clear, it has to be very authentic, it has to be very brief, it has to resonate, it has to persuade, it has to change people's minds. So here are a couple of examples of what I think is good messaging in the political, or good and bad messaging from David Cameron. So I think this was his last conference speech, where he clearly wanted to get over a message that he was not in favour of defending privilege, because that was the criticism that he was under. He used the news vehicle of the party conference speech not to have a new announcement of policy, but to deliver a clear message and to try and get that through the media and communicate it through the media. I'm not here to defend privilege, I'm here to spread it. And it was effective. He ended up leading the news with that line, ended up leading the newspapers with that line, and managed to effectively move the needle. I think a poor example of effective political communication and effective political marketing is the big society, where he says you can call it liberalism, you can call it empowerment, you can call it freedom, you can call it responsibility. I call it the big society. It's about a huge cultural change, and he's managed to define it in so many different ways that it becomes meaningless, and says right at the top that you can call all these different things, and he hasn't really defined the clear message. And as a result, what was a perfectly admirable concept gets blurred, and people have their different interpretations of it, and it's a poor piece, I think, of effective political communication. So I think for both a political party and a company, their organizational objective is quite clear. But then I think the first thing they need to do when they're planning a communications or marketing campaign is to define a communications objective, to work it out. And it's often something like to position us as. And for the Conservative Party, it was to, under David Cameron, it was to change the perception of the Conservative Party away from being the nasty party and to being nicer. And then they had a strategy and a set of tactics that came from that. Back when a lot of people in this room were probably still at primary school back in '97. If you can move on to, going to flick through, the goal was modernising Britain or winning the election. The key message was New Labour, New Britain. The defining arguments were the future, not the past, leadership, not drift, many, not the few, with education as our #1 priority. Those were our dividing lines, and our job was basically to get people on the news saying one of those things, future, not the past, leadership, not drift, many, not the few, every night, no matter what the news story was. And it became, for those watching, quite boring, but it was an effective piece of communication.
What's being an entrepreneur? A theorist is someone willing to accept everything but responsibility. An entrepreneur is the opposite. You try, you make mistakes, and you accept all the responsibility around it. So marketing is actually a story. Everything is a story. And as they talked about the sandal or the flip-flops before, Gandhi, their story is actually what made the product. And that's how people got interested and they got free PR around it. Everyone actually can create a product that's worth talking about. The second thing, I don't know who's familiar here with social proof. Yes? Social proof is what you used to do when you were in school. You used to look at the ceiling and wait until all the other students start looking at the ceiling and then the teacher and saying, what the hell are you looking at? And that's exactly the same thing in life. I don't know if you know Kasparov. Life is a game of chess. And in his book, he actually explains that it's very important to have a goal and to try to achieve that goal. But without a strategy, actually, you're just going to go pretty much nowhere, assuming you're going to try to hit that goal. And other people have a strategy, but they don't have a goal. So they're really, really well organized. They know where they're going, but actually they don't know what the end point is. From the moment someone is seated in front of me in a meeting, and when I started, I knew they wanted something from me. Nobody would sit down with you for even 2 minutes if they didn't actually want something from you or can gain something. So ask, listen, and capture those wants. And the other thing when you're launching a project is, how are you unique? If you look at Google against Yahoo, Google was clean, there was no clutter around it, there was nothing. When you look at MySpace against Facebook, Facebook was amazing to share pictures, and that was really the core of their platform and for friends. MySpace was more open, was more spammy, and didn't really work. So they had something really unique that differentiated them from their competition and what made them take that advantage. Don't necessarily, I see a lot of people trying to start businesses and try to compete on the price. I think price is irrelevant. I go to people and I say, this is my price. And you know why it's my price? Because it's the best price I can give you. And I can't offer you discount. Normally, when I was with my belt company, I'd never offer a discount, but what I do is I'd give an extra product. Because I don't want to devaluate my product, because I'm already giving it to you the best price possible. This is my ultimate favorite one. I use it in every single email. If one of you actually emails me, you'll get that response. If someone calls a favor on you, what do you say? Most people will say, thank you, you're welcome, it was nothing. Someone has an alternative? No? No problem. I'm sure you would have done the same for me. Just that. If you say, you owe me one, you're like, who the hell is this arrogant guy? Like, really? No. If you say, no, it was nothing, actually it was something. You took your weekend, you took some time, you passed some phone calls. You can't just reply to that. But if you just say that, I'm sure you would have done the same for me. It's an acknowledgement that you've actually done something. And it also means that the person owes you something. And every time I put that in an email or when I meet someone, I always get the response, whenever you want, call me. I don't know how many of you know, but when someone says no to you, you have a huge moment of power. And that was actually discovered by Professor Cialdini. And some kids came from Boy Scouts offering him to buy a seat for their event, theater, whatever they had. And he kindly declined. And so the kid turned around and said, well, if you don't want to buy the ticket for the theater, why don't you buy a chocolate bar? And he ended up closing the door, giving $2 and taking 2 chocolate bars. But he doesn't like chocolate. What happened? So once someone says no to you, you actually have that moment of power. So try to utilize it. When someone says yes, please stop talking. I see so many people that come and pitch to you. They pitch your idea. You say, yes, I'm interested. And then they continue. And that's when they lose me, because I realize, oh, I didn't understand that. Actually, no, scrap that. We don't want to go ahead with it. And this is, again, one of my favorite. In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The second best thing is the wrong. And the worst thing you can do is nothing. So try. Thank you very much.
So what I wanted to talk about today is thought leadership. And thought leadership is It's like the halo on the content marketing. It's going a little bit beyond what most of your competitors are going to go into. It's finding something that isn't directly about your product and services and isn't directly about selling your business, but it is positively associated that will enable an interaction with the buyer before they even know they're a buyer. So you take two brothers, Italian, Mario and Luigi. They're both 30. They're twins. And they both own Italian pizzerias on Battersea High Street. So they're in competition, they hate each other's guts, and they basically have exactly the same pizzerias in Battersea High Street, and Mario has come to a PR agency and says, well, how can I be different? How can I be unique when I've got my own brother serving the same food on the same street? And so he needs to find something that is relevant to his business, but interesting enough for the press. So the first thing we do is we analyze all of the press. We analyze to see what stories are running, and it's very simple. You just go to Google News, you type in pizza, you type in Italian, you type in Italian food, you type in small food entrepreneur, and then you start seeing traction in certain news stories that are running and that are being consistently run in top 10 newspapers. By looking at, we come across something called the slow food movement. The first thing we would advise Mario to do is to walk the talk. So open up your refrigerator, sack all of your suppliers who give you frozen food from Indus or wherever they get it from, and just start sourcing organically and making sure that you live the principles. Then luck would have it, the horse meat scandal. Now that is a PR gold, because all of a sudden you've got horse meat everywhere. You've got scandal, you've got front page. So this is the time you go and you contact all of the press and you say, right, horse scandal, here's a local business guide. And so what our friend Mario does is when the horse scandal breaks, he's everywhere. He's on the BBC, he's on the radio, he's on BBC Radio 4, he's calling up his mama in Italy saying, look, mama, I'm famous. His brother is just seething with resentment. He then gets op-eds, he starts writing to the Guardian and says, you know what, I can actually write an op-ed. I was featured in BBC and Radio 4, and I can write an op-ed on this, and this is the reasons why. Then what he does, then you go one step further. You contact the slow food movement in Italy, and he said, you know what, I'm so passionate about what you're doing. You don't have a UK representative. Can I be the UK representative? Can I be your go-to person for it? They're delighted because they've seen all the press that's come. He's proactive. If you're consistent about this, and this takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of resources, and I'm not arguing that this is a difficult thing to do, but if you're consistent about it, then what will happen is that you'll start reaching this tipping point where you'll start having this tumbleweed phase. And this is this magical PR moment when it's less about push, i.e. us pushing it out to the press. It's more about magnetism and more about pull. He could perhaps get bored of doing his PR and just outsource and say, you know what, Luigi, why don't you run my restaurant? Because actually, I'm going to go to America, and I've just been headhunted for a fantastic 4-part series of cooking pizzas in the middle of the Amazon forest, and I'm launching my own cookbooks, and so Luigi, you could just be you could just run my restaurants. That's the story of Mario and Luigi, how you take an intrinsically a difficult business that's difficult to generate press, and you find a thought leadership positioning and how powerful it could be if it's in conjunction with the general trends happening in the press that just require a bit of basic analysis and just some news tracking. But it's definitely something that, and this is the great thing about PR, is it is for small businesses, it is for startups. There's a lot of people that says PR is intangible, it's not suitable, it's a waste of money. One friend just said to me the other day, PR is all about blow drying your hair and wasting time with journalists. PR ironically has one of the worst reputations, considering we are all about reputation. I come from a small business background. I set up my first small business in 1999, which was a tax agency, and I've seen the power of PR for startups, for small businesses, if you use it wisely.
I'm in the business which is offering a service, and I was just wondering how you tackle that. Thank you.
Well, PR is about differentiation and showing why you're different from someone else and your competitors. And I think any professional service firm can do differentiation just as much as a product-based firm. And I think certainly if you look at the large professional service firms, they probably didn't used to spend a huge amount of money on marketing and PR 20 years ago, and they now spend a lot. If you look at the law firms, strategy consultancies, they're all trying to differentiate themselves and point to their different strengths, and they all have large PR departments to differentiate themselves. So I think it is about finding out what are the differentiating factors and finding out, as actually can be easier when you're running a service, to do the sort of thought leadership that Farzana was talking about. And actually, things like the McKinsey Quarterly, I would say, is a fantastic piece of thought leadership. It's one of the original pieces of thought leadership where they just position themselves as a very smart bunch of people who have write very interesting articles and can get who they want to write in their publication, which is a very great differentiating piece of marketing.
So there's a lot of change on the PR industry. So I just wonder, is there any trend or gap that we should be looking for, particularly for 2013?
So it isn't a one-size-fits-all. Like the previous question was, how do you know which marketing, what sort of marketing mix to choose? Everything is very individual, and there's no getting away from the actual hard work of sitting down and thinking about your own business, about what the marketing assets are of your business. So, for instance, if you have very interesting clients or projects, then it's a good idea to go for awards and award submissions, which are very time-consuming. If you are a very good speaker, go for the speaker opportunities. If there's something very inherently newsworthy, spend on media relations. If your target audience is very social media savvy, then you should be focusing. And each different marketing platform should have its own messages. So you're not going to get a 10 steps to marketing genius. You have to actually do the hard work and sit and think about your own business and think about what your assets are and think about your audience, because there's no shortcuts to it. And I think you can't skip the research and the intelligence and the formulating strategy part that is bespoke to you as an individual, as a business, and in your market. You can't go straight to execution. So you're not going to find an easy 10 steps. And if you've got dozens of marketing books that tells you 10 steps, but actually each and every client that walks through agency doors is individual, and a good agency creates bespoke programs, not cookie cutter programs, because that is a waste of everybody's time.
I think the nature of what PR companies is selling is changing, in that I think we used to be selling connections, and we were selling, there's someone with a product or a problem that they needed to communicate about, and then there were the journalists who used to write about it, and then there were the PR companies in the middle who sort of could introduce one to the other, and they spent they made their sell because they went out drinking with the journalists and they knew them, and they came around for dinner and they knew them, and they knew who to introduce people to. And they made that happen, and they made the connections, and they may have helped to advise the client about exactly what to say to the journalist, but really it was about an introduction. And I think that model of PR is going and dying and doesn't really exist, and I don't think we're selling connections anymore. I think we're doing something more interesting, actually, and better for the liver, which is actually helping the clients work out what their message is, and actually creating our own content. If you look, news journalism is in real trouble. It's not a great profession to go into. It's many fewer of them. People are owning their own content. People are communicating directly with the audiences they want to communicate to. The media is one declining channel of many other channels, and what communications professionals are doing is more like what journalists used to be doing, which is crafting the story, creating the content, and helping clients with interesting things to say to say them in an effective way, and through largely digital channels. Now everything we do is about digital communication, really. It's not really about, I know this bloke on the Daily Mail or on the Guardian. So that's a fundamental change to the industry.
If I can just follow up on what Tim was saying, it is true that PR agencies now are trying to create the story for the journalist and create a spin, and that's something that I personally didn't like. So when I went to see a PR agency for myself, one of the things they told me is take one of the biggest entrepreneurs that you know, like a Richard Branson, and criticize him, and we'll get you in the press. And I looked at them and I was like, who the hell am I to criticize a Richard Branson or anyone like that? And straight away kind of blocked. And now, same story, there was one of the Wire staff tried to steal one of the guys in my team, which is a massive, like if you go into PR, they're an accelerator, they're supposed to help startups, and they're actually trying to steal your staff. So we can make a massive PR spin around that. And actually, we're not going to do it just because I don't want the ethos of my company to be kind of, oh, Wire did this to us and da-da-da. And it's not the kind of like the strategy or the philosophy of my business, and that's why I'm not going to take advantage of it. So make sure that when the PR agency comes to you with a proposal, that you're comfortable with it and comfortable with the way it's going to be presented, because once it's out there, you can't do anything about it.
I thought it was really interesting actually. It's kind of nice to have a few varied speakers. So you've got obviously the political point of view, someone who's obviously worked with kind of small entrepreneurial companies, and then also an entrepreneur themselves. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Good. So from my experience of setting up the Entrepreneurial Society, I realized a lot of people are scared of venturing themselves, and they don't realize that actually it's not that hard, and you can just try, and you can set up a company in literally 24 hours and start trading. So I think this kind of event really shows young people and the new generation and the creative generation that it's to anyone's hand, and anyone can be an entrepreneur and anyone can create if they really put their mind to it.
And I think speaking to other people who've done it, speaking to especially people who've failed, is really the best thing about it. I think, because I think you've got to have the confidence to fail. You've got to have the feeling that there are people who've gone out there, failed, and still gone on and to being a success. And it's not the end of their lives. They've tried an idea and it didn't work, but they're now on to another one and it is working.
It's got so much more inspiration than just reading an article or reading their biography. So I think getting face-to-face time with these people, listening to them in person, looking at them brimming with energy, being able to ask them questions, and just having that exposure to them on a human-to-human level, I think is tremendously important. And I think we should be having this every day.
Fantastic panel, amazing questions, and was very well pinpointed on huge variety of points. I really enjoyed it.